Politicians in California have proposed amending the state's constitution to make housing a human right. But how would that affect landlords? I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting topic for you today, and it's, of course, coming out of the state of California. All the crazy anti-landlord laws that I talk about, a lot of them are coming out of the state of California, okay? They seem to be on the cutting edge of stripping away people's property rights, implementing socialist policies, and going too far with the government overreach, okay? So what they're trying to do now, at least some politicians within the state, is they're trying to enshrine within the state's constitution the right of housing, okay, as a human right, okay? So what they want to do is they want to say, oh, everyone should be housed, essentially. Now, this is a big problem because they have a huge homeless population in the state of California. And because they are so anti-landlord, this could have huge effects on the way the landlords are treated within the state in terms of what they can do with their own properties. We might be forced to keep tenants in our properties without getting paid any rent. Now, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen immediately. And by them passing this law, though, they are saying that, hey, well, we think that housing is more important than money. We think that everyone, housing is a pure human right. Well, I see it a little bit differently, okay? I see housing as something that you purchase, kind of like food, Like nobody ever said, well, food is a human right. Nobody ever says water is a human right. Now, do you need food and water to survive? Yes. Do you need housing to survive? Well, you need some sort of shelter. But that doesn't mean that, hey, well, now, you should be able to get food for free. No, it doesn't mean that you should be able to get water for free, and you shouldn't be able to get housing for free either. And you notice that those other things are not listed in any state constitution talking about, well, food is a human right, so we enshrined it within the Constitution, because these states, they know the game, okay? They know that if they pass this sort of thing and they write it into the state constitution, well, something has to be done about all these people who don't have housing. Something has to be done to make sure that people don't ever lose their housing. And the only way we can make that happen is if they pass a whole bunch of socialist policies where the government is in charge of all of the housing within the state. So, yeah, I'm talking about nightmare scenarios here, but, who knows what could happen? Who knows how this sort of thing will be interpreted going down into the future, okay? So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you believe that housing is a human right? Okay? I believe that life is a human right. That's it. Life, the right to live. Now, when we start going into all these little, rabbit holes of all the other little things, oh, well, you know what? Fresh air is a human right. Or, I don't think that we need to go down those holes, okay? I think that what we need to do is we need to have less government regulation, not be enshrining more so-called rights, okay? Let's look at the things that are truly necessary to live versus the things that, we can do without. And when it comes down to it, housing is not necessary to live. It isn't. Okay? Do we need housing? Yeah, we need housing. We need shelter from the elements, etc. But do the people, just as an example, do people living, who are homeless, living in the tent, living on the street corner, they don't just die just because they're standing on a street corner or sleeping on a bench. No, they still are able to live. So, they still have their life. They're still able to survive, So anyway, let me get into this article, and I'm going to go over a bit more of the details. Hopefully the article will. This article is coming from westsidetoday.com, and it says, proposed amendment to the California Constitution passes the Housing Committee. Let's see what it says. California Assembly member Matt Haney of District 17 in San Francisco has introduced ACA 10, which is a constitutional amendment for the state of California that would enshrine the fundamental right to housing in the state's constitution. According to the Sacramento Bee, ACA 10 passed a vote in the Assembly Committee on Housing and Community Development with a 6-2 vote. The no votes were from Republicans, members of the committees on June 7th, 2023. So yeah, California has a super majority of Democrats, right? And the Republicans were the only people who voted against this because they probably, like me, see the unintended consequences of passing this sort of thing as a constitutional amendment, okay? Assemblymember Haney reminded everyone while making a speech, and as quoted by reporter Etten Wallace, that the situation in the state is that while many California residents realize that there is a problem with homelessness, no one is quite sure what to do about it. On the west side of Los Angeles, people see unhoused people in encampments, but for so long there hasn't been an overall plan to house people and keep others from falling into homelessness, Haney said. This is about accountability. Otherwise, we have the status quo. We have more homeless people than anywhere in the country. We have more rent-burdened people. We have a lack of follow-through at every level of government. Now, notice what he said there, okay? At first, he started off, oh, we've got all these homeless people. We've got all these homeless people. But then he suddenly moves over into, oh, we have rent-burdened people. Now, wait a second here. Rent-burdened people aren't homeless, you know? Do they have the potential of becoming homeless? Perhaps. But why are we talking about that? Because in his mind, right, this is a landlord issue. This is an issue of property rights. And the whole purpose behind this law is to make sure that landlords, we lose those property rights and that we will be unable to evict tenants even if they are unable to pay the rent. Okay, that's my belief. That is the way I am reading this. Okay, and I'm a logical person, and I don't think this is a good idea. I think that this is, obviously a push towards a socialist housing policy. Either where there's two options available. Either the government is going to provide housing for all of these people, right? And I don't see that happening because the government, they mismanage everything. They would have to spend billions of dollars to build the new housing. What is much more likely is something similar to what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, where they said, oh, well, landlords, you can't evict people even if they don't pay rent. Remember, they just did this. We just went through this for the last 3 years. They just ended the eviction moratoriums in places like San Francisco and Oakland recently. So landlords there already know what it's like when they don't receive rent from people. They already know what it's about. So to me, when they're saying, oh, well, housing is a human right and people, they have to have housing. Well, what they're saying is landlords, you have to keep these people in this housing so that they don't become homeless, even if they don't pay you rent. Because you don't think for 1 second, do not think for 1 second that the government is going to compensate landlords for any of this. I don't believe it. We saw what happened with the rental assistance programs. We saw so many landlords who either were ineligible or who applied and never received anything. And now you want me to believe that somehow the government's going to pay rental assistance for these people? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The ACLU has expressed support for ACA 10 and said via Twitter, a right to housing is the tool we need to end barriers and ensure that everyone has a stable and permanent home in California. Thank you to Assembly Housing Committee members for voting to pass ACA 10 by Matt Haney. I use that voice with the ACLU because they are a joke and I treat them as such. Somebody commented on one of my videos, oh, you use a funny voice and, we're mocking somebody. Yeah, I do that, okay? When I think something is stupid, well, I'm going to mock it, okay? So I don't care if you get offended by it. One thing to remember is that the amendment doesn't mean that everyone in the state will be given housing for free, Assemblymember Haney said via his Twitter page on June 8th. Nothing in this amendment gives everyone free housing from the government. It simply recognizes housing as a fundamental human right, which is common sense for most people, deeply interconnected to every other right we are afforded as citizens, and that government has to plan within available resources to meet that right and be accountable. And when it is violated, there should be scrutiny similar to the many other rights we are afforded as citizens. So notice what this guy said, okay? Now, I can read between the lines. Now, he said specifically, nothing in this amendment gives everyone free housing from the government, okay? So in my mind, his intention is not for the government to provide the free housing. It's for you as the landlord. It is your responsibility to make sure that these people have somewhere to live. Okay? You need to open up your doors, pay your mortgage so that this person can live in your property for free. What a joke. Oh man. So this sounds like an awful idea. I'm not going to read any more of the article. I put a link to it in the description below, but you get the gist of it. We're going to see some unintended consequences of this if it does pass. I could even see the government being somehow forced to raise taxes on people. This is a money pit. This is a money pit because there's never going to be a time when everyone is able to afford their housing. Even in places in this country that are cheap, you have people who still are struggling to afford housing. They're like, you could go to the cheapest state in the country is probably like Mississippi or Arkansas or something like that, right? And even in those places where housing is super duper cheap, people still struggle to afford housing. There's still people who are homeless. So you're never going to be able to truly resolve the problem 100%. So yeah, man, bad news for landlords out there. I hope this doesn't pass. I just hope that this disappears.